Great to be with the Texans who power the Texas economy.
Globally, what we do matters. We heat homes, we power schools, hospitals, and industries. We provide raw materials for products that make our daily lives better.
When we think about the future of consumerism, we have to recognize that the things that millennials are doing today, every other generation is doing tomorrow.
What does the industry look like in 10 years?
I think we all know we're going to be here in 10 years.
Countries come to Texas to get energy supply now. That is just a remarkable state of affairs.
And I think we have an obligation to take care of people and make their lives better.
We're actually a technology company that produces oil and gas that powers human progress.
I want to congratulate TXOGA on 100 years of service to our great state. You have made Texas better. Thank you, TXOGA. Happy anniversary.
Good morning and welcome to the Texas Oil and Gas Association's 2020 Lone Star Energy Forum, Powering Forward. I'm Todd Staples and I serve as president of the association, also known as TXOGA. I am excited about our program today and about the lively discussion covering our energy future at both the national and state level, and particularly in light of Tuesday night's election results, which are still pending as of the time we start this program today, and certainly all the hype that has led up to it. While the difficulties of 2020 cannot be overstated, today we will explore just how Texas is positioned to continue its strong role of energy leadership for our country and our world. As we start our program today, I want to thank these companies who have made today possible. TXOGA's 2020 sponsors, Oventive, PDC Energy, Concho Resources, the Port of Corpus Christi, and our event sponsors, Chevron, Energy Transfer, Texas Mutual, Valero Energy, the South Texas Energy and Economic Roundtable, the TXOGA Good Government Committee, and the TXOGA Insurance Agency. The introductory video that began our program featuring Governor Greg Abbott was from our centennial celebration last year, when in 2019, TXOGA marked its founding 100 years. Interestingly, 1919 was the year that we were also facing, as you might recall from reading, a global pandemic in the form of the Spanish flu. But ladies and gentlemen, just like people, businesses, and communities all across the country did 100 years ago, today, the Texas oil and natural gas industry is powering forward. Our world is cleaner, stronger, and better because of the positive influence of oil and natural gas produced right here in the Lone Star State. Although we continue to face challenging and uncertain times, one thing remains certain: families across the globe continue to need abundant supplies of irreplaceable oil and natural gas. It is no exaggeration that oil and natural gas are the building blocks for countless products each of us use every day. Essentials like medicines, contact lenses, heart valves, electronics, sports equipment, and yes, even electric cars and solar panels, as well as wind turbines, actually require oil and natural gas for the creation of their components. In a nutshell, oil and natural gas make the essentials possible. They are indispensable to our world. In fact, you might have heard me say earlier that Texas is actually cleaner, stronger, and better. So here's why. Oil and natural gas companies are pioneering breakthrough technologies to capture, use, and store carbon dioxide, and other innovations such as optical gas imaging cameras, drones, cloud computing, robotics, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, and more. Thanks to the increased use of affordable, reliable natural gas brought to us by modern fracking, by the way, the United States-related CO2 emissions are at their lowest levels in a generation, and natural gas is the reason the United States leads the world in reducing CO2 emissions since 2000. Plus, methane emissions from oil and natural gas systems are down 23% since 1990. Industry is committed to environmental progress, and these investments are working. But as we all know too well during these times, growth is not guaranteed. With the right policies, oil and natural gas are poised to do their part in maintaining national and energy security, along with helping to rebound our economy. Like all of you, TXOGA is powering forward, and today we have a dynamic, thought-provoking program for you featuring some of our state and nation's top thought leaders. In this next session, we want to focus just on what does industry's recovery look like after this election cycle and the COVID-19 pandemic, which we hope ends soon, and how can Texas continue its role as the energy capital of the world. To answer these questions and more, we're so pleased that Devon Energy President and CEO Dave Hager could join us in the city. As many of you know, WPX Energy Chairman and CEO Rick Muncrief was scheduled to join us, but due to unforeseen circumstances is unable to do so. But Dave, we are so fortunate to have you with us today, and we will get you to be with us here for the next few minutes. Did you enjoy Juan and Greg this morning?
They were fabulous, Todd. It was great to listen to them. The only thing that aggravated me is when Greg started going off on his idea for a commercial. I have an idea for a full-length movie, which is 1 day without oil and gas, 7 days without oil and gas, and a year without oil and gas. And what would that do to the world? And I thought I was being creative for my next career, and I guess I need to stick to oil and gas because others are already thinking of that.
I think I see another merger coming along. Greg Gutfeld and Dave Hager are coming together.
No, I don't think so.
Well, there is a merger, though, that has been in the news a lot lately between Devon and WPX Energy that I know you and Rick have probably spent more time together than any two people in America here these last few months thinking about this. We know it's been busy. We know there's probably some things you can't tell us, but can you share with us here a couple of minutes as we get started about the status and some things we can think about?
Yeah, I'd be glad to, Todd. And obviously I have to be a little bit careful here, but we're really excited about the merger between Devon and WPX. Rick and I just have tremendous respect for each other. We have tremendous trust in each other. And when we started talking, we said, is there an opportunity here to really create something that is better than either one of us can achieve easily as individual companies? And so that's the attitude that we approach this merger with, is to try to take the best from both sides. And by my looking at it, there really hasn't been kind of a merger of equals. And we came up with like 18 years since the most recent one, because our industry is really great at one buying something was 80-20 or 90-10, but and then you take the assets, but you don't really combine and take the best processes necessarily from both sides. But that's the approach we've taken. We're excited. We're going to have 300,000 net acres in Texas, a big part of our overall position, 400,000 net acres in the Permian Basin, with a lot on the New Mexico side as well. We see the ability to lower the break-evens. There are obviously operational synergies, corporate type synergies as well. And again, just taking the best from both sides, starting with the board through senior management, all through the working level. We think we're going to create a great company. So we've started to have integration thoughts already. We put together an integration team to start thinking about all those type things, and hopefully get the transaction closed somewhere around the end of the year.
Well, we wish you both the very best. You mentioned some things, Dave, that confirms to me that the oil and gas industry is going to be here for the long haul. We know that this region of the United States, Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Western Louisiana, all has a big role to play. And we're certainly glad in Texas of the continued role that we're going to play. But in thinking about this, we don't know when demand is coming back. We don't know what level demand might reach once we return to whatever the new normal is. Yeah. So we know these are financial challenges then that you all are working for and that industry is looking out for. What are the types of things that we're doing specifically, and should industry be doing to think about demand and when it might return?
Well, it's pretty obvious, Todd. We all know we produce a commodity, and we don't really control the price of those commodities, whether it's the oil or the natural gas side of it. So when we think about what really creates a successful company, I think of four different things. I think first, you want to have a great asset base. And because it fundamentally starts with the rocks. And so you want to have quality acreage position in order to be able to start a company. Second thing, you have to execute extremely well as a company. And so operationally, you have to be able to deliver on that, drill and complete wells in an efficient manner, target the right zones, deliver great well results overall. Third, you have to have, I think it's appropriate in this industry where you don't control the commodity price, is to really have financial strength, because we never know when the next challenge may come along. I think over the last 11 years, and the way I look at it, we've had 3 times when oil and gas prices have collapsed. And you can say, well, each of those were unique events. That's never going to happen again. But the reality is we've had 3 events in the last 11 years. And so you have to have a company with financial strength, because we think operational continuity is really important. You don't want to just drop all your activity. You want to have the strength and the hedging position to be able to maintain some level of activity, because that's when you produce the greatest returns. And then the fourth, I think, is what we've been talking about here the last hour. It's just the importance of ESG. That you have to, it's a reality that companies are going to have to do good in the ESG space. My personal belief is that we're doing better than, as everybody says, we're doing a lot better than a lot of people understand. But we certainly have to continue to work on getting the message out there around the ESG side. So, obviously the pandemic's created a lot of challenges here. I don't know any more than anybody else on when the pandemic challenge is going to go away, when there's going to be an effective vaccine that's really going to allow us to turn back to some version of a more normal lifestyle, as you might say, for demand to come back up, when distillates are going to come back up, when aviation fuel is going to come back up, which are a couple of the key indicators you want to think about. From a micro level, the demand's coming back up. But what you can do is run a company so that you can be successful in any environment. And so to get your cost structure down so you can survive in a lower price environment. And if prices do come back higher, you can generate significant cash flow, which we think is important and part of our business model, return that to investors.
You mentioned 4 keys, Dave, and I wrote them down. So you may see me quoting you from time to time. I do want to follow up with you on 2 of those keys. The second key you mentioned was execution, operationally. As I think about that, producing crude and refined products at lower cost is going to be essential to remain competitive. We know this is a global product. And so what happens in other countries impact jobs, and it impacts the state of Texas budget that we'll talk about with our next panel in just a few minutes. And it impacts local governments that companies like yours play such a big outsized role in funding schools and in funding road development and funding first responders. So as we think about execution and we think about operations in that context, how big a role do you see innovation playing in oil and gas operations and as you carry out and develop your product?
Oh, I think it's huge. You've hit on what I think is just really one of the most important things that for a company to be successful that's out there. And I can tell you at Devon, we've been on a journey around innovation over the past few years. And the first thing we had to do, which is the most mundane thing, and it doesn't get anybody excited when you say it, but I think anybody that knows the reality of it is you got to get your data in good shape. A lot of us have a lot of data in a lot of different forms, and you've got to have that data, the historical data, in such a way that you can really make it useful for your technical professional employees. We are also collecting, as everybody is, a huge amount of data now, and that is leading to innovation, where before we might have done things by hunch, by trial and error. We have a tremendous amount of data analytics that we are performing as a company that are important both from an operational perspective and even from an ESG perspective. So to give you an idea on the ESG side, we have trained our computers in some cases to look for potential issues involving our flaring, our combustors, when they may see a potential irregularity. We don't have to have people necessarily go to the field to check that out. We now can have the data analytics to do that. Obviously, another huge area is drilling and completion, more on the operational side. We have a huge amount of data that's coming in from that. We remotely monitor all of those operations in real time, all the time. We are adjusting on the fly our parameters, and we think we're one of the leaders in terms of drilling and completion costs in the Delaware Basin out there. And I give a lot of credit to the data analytics and the ability to make quick changes out there, as well as just we stayed with the same basically drilling design for a number of wells, and now so we're getting a lot of reps on those drilling designs. But innovation is important. But I think from a broader perspective, Todd, I'll say, just going back, I've been in the industry for about 40 years. I remember the day when, frankly, the onshore was dead, many people thought. And I spent a great deal of my career in really moving to the offshore, first the shelf, and then the deep water Gulf of Mexico. We're involved in a lot of major developments and innovations that were taking place in the deep water Gulf of Mexico earlier in my career. Did a lot of work internationally as well. And then just look what's happened. And it's been innovation of the whole horizontal drilling, hydraulic fracturing revolution that has brought us many companies back to focus on shore. So we have a history of innovation in this industry that goes back, if you think about it in a more broad sense, for many, many years. And that's why, I was encouraged to hear the previous panel, and particularly Greg, say he looks at innovation and technology as a solution for the ESG issue as well. That's absolutely the way I look at it. We've had challenges before. I don't see where this is a unique challenge. So I think we're already doing better than most people realize, but I think it has stepped up, the challenge has, and I have no doubt this industry is going to meet the challenge of this and remain viable for a long, long time.
Well, I as an observer, to get to watch our member companies like you and others, we think of you as oil and gas companies, but I think of you more and more as innovation and technology companies. I really do, because I've personally seen the breakthroughs that have led to phenomenal outcomes that have benefited the state of Texas. Last year, Dave, you and your peers paid over $16 billion in state and local taxes and state royalties. That's $44 million a day going to fund our schools, fund our roads, fund our first responders. And so you couldn't have done that had you continuously not reinvented yourself. And, you mentioned ESG. I think that we have a big audience with us today. Not everyone may understand the environmental, social, and governance aspect that companies are trying to achieve targets. And we certainly appreciate that. And thinking about all that's facing oil and gas right now, Dave, if you could pick one or two of the biggest challenges on your radar screen that industry should do to prepare itself, what might that be?
I think it's important to think about that we are obviously, and we've been talking a lot about things like ESG, and the previous panel was talking a lot about just the political environment and the challenges that we have from those that don't appreciate our industry. And that's certainly one element of it. But I think the other element is we have to recognize as an industry, and certainly for the public companies, and I think to a large degree, the PE-backed and the private companies, we're competing for capital, and our returns haven't been very good. Let's just be transparent about it. We have done a tremendous amount of good for our country. We have energy dominance, energy independence, all the benefits that we do for that. We have overachieved as an industry on that front. We have underachieved, I think, in returns to our investors. And so I think that when I look at one of the biggest challenges, certainly you can talk about the ESG and the political acceptance of it all. But I think that's solvable. Because I believe fundamentally that we are doing good on those areas. And if we can get the word out on that, then the truth eventually will be heard and understood. And we're just going to be a part of the energy equation for a long, long time if we can deliver competitive returns. And I think that's where the good news around that. And we had an issue around this before the pandemic. It's easy to talk about the pandemic caused all these challenges, but frankly, we were fighting this challenge before the pandemic. I think it just accelerated and exacerbated the challenge around financial returns. But I think we've learned that it's great to have energy independence, have energy dominance, but you have to also realize you can't just grow uncontrollably and produce as much into a market that has a finite amount of demand, and you count on OPEC to curtail production in order to maintain prices. I think the good news is the industry is starting to understand that much, much better and is transitioning more to a more realistic growth model, returning value to shareholders through cash returns. But to me, I think we have to continue to fight that. You know, we love this industry. We all love this industry. We all love to drill wells. We all love to produce oil and gas, and we love all the benefits we're providing to the world. We have to realize at the same time, there's only so much of the supply that the world needs. And so we have to moderate that supply to more mass demand to maintain pricing.
Well, you mentioned flaring previously. I picked up on that, and I do want to talk about the climate and some things. But before we do, I don't want to talk about the pandemic anymore for the next 100 years. Maybe we won't have another one. But as we are hopefully emerging as a nation, our companies spend a lot of time planning. The companies have a pandemic plan? I mean, or do y'all have scenarios that you think about what ifs and how you would prepare for it? And, it's amazing, I think, Dave, that the fuel was still at the convenience stores. The power for electrical generation, or if it went right to the homes to heat and cool the homes, never skipped a beat. And that's because of our employees that were delivering on a daily basis. And so is this something that caught industry off guard, or are there contingency plans for these kinds of things? And what role do our employees play in that?
Well, okay, so you're going to roll your eyes at this one when I give you this answer, but we really did have a pandemic plan. Wow. And we had drilled around. Now, it was not a pandemic plan for COVID-19. Right. It was a pandemic plan for an influenza type event that might have spread on a worldwide basis. And so it was easy to adapt that plan to this COVID-19 plan. I think that's one of the great benefits that we have had as a company, is that we had a strong emergency response team and preparedness, but I think the industry did as well. Overall, whether you had a specific COVID-19 plan or not, I suspect very few did, but I think that overall, we were able to adapt very quickly as an industry and deliver what the supply that was needed. It wasn't a supply shortfall. I can tell you, we activated our team actually in January when we saw this may emerge into something. And our team is a multidiscipline team. It's not just an health and safety. It's an operations, it's supply chain. We started asking ourselves, okay, what could be limited in supply? What are the 2 or 3 levels down type things that could happen to our industry? We're fortunate also as a company, we had migrated about all our data to the cloud. And so moving to work from home environment was really not a significant challenge from a technical standpoint. I don't know, it's had all sorts of social issues associated with it, but from a technical standpoint, being able to work from home was not a big issue. And we feel good. As a company, we've had less than 10 COVID cases overall. And we think maybe one of those was actually, we're not even sure, one of those may have been from the work environment, the rest of them from the personal environment. But, as an industry, you're absolutely right, Todd. We've delivered. And, we do provide an essential for modern life. And it's just so easy for us to take it for granted in this country. because we have been blessed with this for so long, where other areas of the world have still not as fortunate as we are here in the United States. But we've kept everything going strong. I was reminded, I watched something last week. There was an ice storm actually hit in some of our operations areas out in southeast New Mexico. Then it moved through Oklahoma City. So that was one more thing we got to deal with in 2020. I had a few days without power, but in southeast New Mexico, we never lost power there. And I was reminded by one of the local officials there that 94% of that power came from oil and gas and 6% from renewables. So that just shows the importance of our industry to keep the lights on and the heat going and to keep every convenience we enjoy in modern society. Oil and gas is fundamental to it.
Well, reliability is something that every consumer needs with every product they have. And certainly when it comes to life-saving product like power that fuels our cars and our homes and our emergency rooms, it's good to know that oil and gas is playing such a big role. And I think it's comforting for the American public to know that pandemic plans are something that oil and gas companies really do spend time thinking about. I know safety is the biggest issue that oil and gas companies really work on. I've got about 25 questions on climate and the environment, Dave. My folks are telling me that we're having too much fun here today, and we've got one more panel before we conclude our overall program today. But I've certainly enjoyed our time with you. And I would like you to maybe take 1 to 2 minutes, if you will, and kind of give us some closing thoughts that you might have. But if all of my climate questions can be rolled up into one, and you might have heard this on the previous panel a little bit about energy transition. You know, what does energy transition mean? Does that mean oil and gas goes away? Or does that mean oil and gas changes in what we do and how we do it? And so if you could roll all that up into a wrap up, that would help me. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, I think they'd like us to say that energy transition is transition away from oil and gas, but that's not what it is in my mind. Energy transition is transition to where we are providing our products in even more environmentally friendly way than we have historically. And I think we've done a good job, but I think there is room for improvement, and we are continuing to improve. And again, I think it'll be solved. This industry is going to be here. I think if you're coming out of college right now and you're worried about the future of this industry, whether you want to be in it, it's going to be here for the length of anyone's career that's coming out of college at this point. Right now, 70% of all the energy demand in the United States is satisfied by oil and gas. 11% is from renewables, and the rest is coal and nuclear. And so when you think about, and they talked about some previous panel, the implications of trying to scale up renewable to replace oil and gas, and what are, as I'd call, the negative externalities associated with that. It's not the fact that the wind blows or the sun shines, is the fact how you take that raw source of energy and turn it into a usable source of energy that's really doesn't have the energy density of oil and gas. And windmills, solar panels, batteries, they aren't renewable. And so there hasn't been a lot of serious study done around all of that work. So when you start factoring and you see the reality, oil and gas, we've done a tremendous job for 100 years. We're going to continue to do a tremendous job for many, many more years. And I love the people in this industry. I love the thought of what we're doing for the world. And I have no doubt that we're going to meet the next challenge as well and be viable for a long, long time.
Well, Dave, your leadership for this industry and for our nation goes a long way. We thank you for spending time with us today and for the role that you play. And we wish you the very best as you continue in this merger and continue for generations providing the products that the American public needs. Thanks for being with us.
Great. Thank you, Todd. It's a real pleasure.
Thank you. Take care and have a great week.
Okay. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin our final segment of today's program, where we will take on the tough topic of what to expect from the Texas 87th legislative session that begins in January, just a couple of months away, and we want to talk about the key issues our industry will face there, we want to take a moment to show a video we created to honor the very key to success in the energy world. and that is the essential employees of the oil and natural gas industry. I'm referring to the women and men who didn't skip a beat when the world came to a grinding halt because of the global pandemic and who continue their essential role. So take a listen. We hope you'll enjoy it.
They say every new day is a new opportunity to be a little better than the day before. In these challenging times, we have been reminded what matters most, what is essential to our lives. And when our world was turned upside down, when it seems hard to muster the energy for another day, Americans know they'll have the energy they need to power up for work or school. Thanks to the relentless commitment of the oil and natural gas industry. Because in this business, we know what it means to be essential. So let's salute the essential energy employees, the front lines at refineries and chemical plants, shifting operations to produce hand sanitizer, the roughnecks, drillers, and welders who show up and step up every single day, the engineers and analysts developing innovative solutions, the pipeline and port crews making that final mile. Whether they masked up and headed into work or worked virtually from home, we're proud of our oil and natural gas employees who know what it means to be essential. And in spite of these challenging times, they see an opportunity to do what they do even stronger, even better. Because when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And we Texans, thank you.
I am proud of the men and women of energy. In spite of the adversity that the pandemic presents, our essential energy employees have all stepped up to the challenge with resilience and innovation. From all of us here at TXOGA and the member companies that we represent, we salute you for all that you do. Ladies and gentlemen, our final segment will focus on Texas policy, specifically the upcoming 87th legislative session, the challenges our industry will face during the legislative process. Joining us today to dive into this discussion are former Speaker of the Texas House, Tom Craddick from Midland, Chairman Oscar Longoria from Mission, and Chairman Chris Paddie from Marshall. Gentlemen, we're glad that you could be with us today, and I guess your hometown needs to start with an M to get on the program today, Midland, Mission, and Marshall. And so we've got some good things going on, and you all are great. And Mr. Speaker, we can get you to unmute your system for us there, and we will have you on. It's good to be with you all today.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you for joining us. We know there's been a great deal of speculation surrounding this last election cycle. The Texas House does tremendous work. You all are three key leaders who are difference makers. You know, there was some thought about there might be a change up in the partisan makeup. There's still a few seats that may change. We don't think so, but here's the way I'd like to start out today. You know, regardless of what was speculated, many of our viewers today really care about affordable, reliable power supplies. That's what they're thinking about as they think about Texas. It's not from a partisan perspective. Mr. Speaker, you've seen a few elections come and go. What advice do you have for this industry as we sit here today, thinking about January being right around the corner in this new legislative session?
Well, I think the main thing we've got to do is get together, Todd, on all of the issues we've got and pre-plan them, because I think we're going to have a situation where there aren't going to be a lot of meetings in the Capitol. They're not going to allow like Midland Day and whatever in the Capitol. That's our understanding. So you're not going to be able to go in and out of the Capitol. I think now is the time for the industry to look at what are the problems, how can we solve them. Let's see if we can get together during this period now. And when we come to the session, we're in pretty much in agreement. During the last session, as you know, from working on some of the oil and gas industry problems, we're down to the last day or two trying to fight on things. And that's really not the best way to perform it. So I've talked to several groups around the state and encouraged them to do this, and that's what I think needs to be done.
I think that's good advice, Mr. Speaker, getting together early, having conversations. Texans have a great history of rolling up our sleeves and solving problems, and not having access to the Capitol the way everyone is accustomed to is going to change, obviously, things. Chairman Longoria, I know you watch the budget pretty closely from your role and the things that you do. Everyone is talking about this is going to be a budget session. The revenues that this industry have paid is, even though it won't be the history-making level that it was last year, oil and gas is still going to pay billions in state and local taxes and state royalties. So as a lawmaker who's going to be looking at these things, what's the bottom line here? What do you think the priority spending issues are going to be for the legislature, and how we all manage through this difficult time?
Well, Todd, I think at this point in time, we want to make sure we at least keep the status quo. We are getting into a tough budget cycle. Comptroller Hager said about a couple of weeks ago that we're looking at about a $4.5 billion budget deficit. And that's for our current budget, our ongoing obligations that we have to satisfy as a state. I anticipate with the CARES monies that we receive from the federal government, along with the rainy day fund, that we could probably get out of that situation about dipping in about $1 billion in a supplemental budget. But the big question is, what does this upcoming budget look like? I've heard projections anywhere between 18 to $30 billion. If you look at it, about a $20 billion budget deficit, and looking at it as a pragmatic matter, you can defer $2 billion from Medicaid, $2 billion from the foundation school program, keeps you at about $16 billion. And we're going to have to figure out how to get that done without, taking all the money out of the rainy day fund. There's discussions, and we have certain options available to us, but all this is subject to change. And ultimately, what does Washington, D.C. do? Are they going to give us any federal dollars? That's an option out there. Now, we're not taking that into account. But I think there's a lot of men and women working towards making sure that we address these budgetary needs. And we have a heavy reliance on the oil and gas industry. The money that goes in from those severance taxes, that goes into the prop and also goes into the... It's important. It's important we address it. And we have reliance on the oil and gas industry. And I think the state is here to back up that industry and make sure that they get out of this rough predicament that they're currently in.
Well, we're certainly ready to get out of it. It's been a difficult process for sure. This industry is unbelievably resilient. The men and women in it roll up their sleeves. They're problem solvers. And, once we get our demand returning to somewhat of a normal level, we can get back to doing what we do. And we want to get on track. And policies influence that, obviously. I mean, Mr. Speaker, as proud as we are of the Permian Basin, we know that you can produce oil and gas anywhere in the world today. And so we want it produced right here in Texas, and we need policies that ensure that. And all three of you have certainly worked hard to make certain that industry knows there is certainty in our governmental process, which is important when people decide where to put their jobs. Chairman Paddie, you're chairman of the House Energy Committee. You keep a real close watch on the energy sector, the health of it, the responsibility that it has to be a partner with our state. Do you see things on the horizon for the energy sector this next session? Or, maybe it might not even be energy related directly, but it will impact us. What are some things that you're seeing as we zoom in on January?
I see what you did there with the zoom in to January. Yeah. First of all, thanks, Todd, for having me. And it's great to be on with these two great members. And I would certainly admit that I'm far less qualified to talk about anything related to this industry than Speaker Craddick, but I'll give it a shot here. But I do want to also, before I say that, thank you and all of your members. That was a great video you showed a little bit earlier, and for all that you and your members have done throughout this very difficult time to step up and do what you've always done, and that's support our communities and roll up your sleeves and get the work done. So thank you for that. But yeah, I think it's, what's interesting about chairing the Energy Committee is that although that is our area that we're focused on, a lot of the issues actually occur outside the Energy Committee right now. And Speaker Craddick knows this very well, chairing Land Resource Management, where, some of the bigger discussions and bigger disagreements, deal with issues like eminent domain and some things like that we continue to have to figure out how we balance, protecting landowner rights, but at the same time, we recognize that we've got to do business in this state and that we've got products that have to get to market. And so I'm hopeful that we can continue to work on towards a resolution there. I think, always the issues of water, both on the supply side and produce water type issues. I mean, those issues are going to continue to be there. And I think at times when we do have some downturns in the industry where maybe you don't, maybe that is not as hot an issue because you're not producing as much water. But I think that also presents an opportunity to try to find some solutions before this thing turns back around and we're blowing and going at some of the levels we've seen in the past as well. And so I'm hopeful we can do that. I know the issue of flaring is certainly that I know that I want to thank the industry for being very engaged there and a task force that's been very doing great work there to try to find solutions and bring awareness to the fact that there's been tremendous strides already and continue to be great strides in the areas of that and methane emissions and things of that nature. Pipeline infrastructure, obviously going hand in hand with eminent domain. We have to be able to get this product to market. That goes hand in hand with the discussion on flaring. You can't be opposed to flaring at the same time being opposed to part of the solution, which is building the infrastructure to be able to alleviate some of that. Continue to focus on reasonable regulations, good tax policy, obviously with the budget situation, that's something definitely the industry and we're going to have to keep an eye on and to try to do. And of course, we did some things last session as related to protecting our critical infrastructure. We need to make sure that we continue to do that and those things are functioning as they should. And so, I think there's a lot of issues. I would agree with Speaker Craddick too, though, now more than ever, every industry needs to be doing their best to do some work in preparation of the session because we're just going to have limited capacity to get a lot of things done, particularly if we get there and decide to go to our respective corners and start trying to duke it out. We're not going to get those things done. And so as well packaged as we can have those things, and if you could deliver those two with a nice little bow on it, we could probably get those things done this session, but it's going to be difficult to get some of those heavy lift items done just because, not because we don't want to or don't need to, but I'm just concerned we're not going to have the capacity to do it.
Well, your plate's going to be full. You mentioned infrastructure and development. I want to get to that, but I ran out of time with Dave Hager with Devon to really talk about climate issues. And so I want to talk about infrastructure, but before we do that, we've heard flaring repeated here today. It's been a part of the conversation, obviously, in the news media. Industry has stepped up and collectively come together and formed the Texas Methane and Flaring Coalition, which has done some amazing work in a real short period of time. And all of you might want to weigh in on this topic some more. And Speaker Craddick, let's start with you, though. Your perspective on flaring, is this a legislative topic? Is this a role of the regulatory agency? And what's the industry's responsibility here? Can you elaborate on that, Speaker Craddick, and start with you, please?
Sure. I believe that it's an issue for the agency, not for the legislature. And I think that we need to be all together on that, not try to be introducing bills to do different factors. I also think that, we've got to get some more technology improvement over to the commission. And I think that would help. And by the way, when we go from Austin to Midland or whatever right now, used to be you see flaring, flares everywhere. When Nadine and I went home a couple of weeks ago when we were down here, we only saw, I think, two wells that were flaring. And most people, and Chris actually mentioned this, most people don't understand that without flaring that gas, if you can't get that gas off, you can't produce the oil. And if you can't have a pipeline, then you got to flare the oil or shut it down. And so I think if I can back up, can we go back and forth a little bit?
Absolutely.
Okay. We talked about the money. And, right now, as you're well aware, Todd, and everybody else is, you get your basis of what you're going to get taxed ad valorem tax-wise on oil and gas is what the price was on January 1st, which was very high. Now, I don't know what it's going to be. I hope it's that size January 1st this year, but don't think I'd hold my breath. So when that comes way down, and you're what, $20 down from where it was today or less or more. I mean, so let's just say $20. When that comes down, that is really going to hit ad valorem tax values. And when you do that, I think you asked, or maybe, I don't know, one of y'all asked about the cost, but what you're going to be is in a situation where your schools, your cities, your hospitals, all those are going to have less dollars to spend because our ad valorem taxes are going to come way down. And then the state, their money's going to come way down. So I think we need to be looking at this and trying to figure out where we're going ahead of time, because we're going to have, if the counties and the cities and whatever try to keep it up, schools, you're going to have huge lawsuits and nothing but chaos. And back here, I'm sorry, I just wanted to go back to that. But I think that the industry needs to push for some extra technology things and see what we can improve. And I know I had in the last session, we did the GROW bill, which people said, well, it doesn't affect us. But it does affect you. Remember the map we used? And I know Chris will remember that. We used this map of the state that I got from the Railroad Commission that showed where the production was. And I don't remember the number now. Maybe out of 254 counties, I think there were 20 something that didn't have oil and gas. But it affects the coast because of the pipelines that are going to go down. It affects whether or not their refineries have fuel and to work on, to refine. So, I mean, this is all a big part of it.
You know, you bring up a good point, Mr. Speaker, that you don't have to live in the oil patch to benefit from all the good that oil and gas does in Texas. Every part of our state, every school district benefits, every university. If you drive on anywhere in Texas, oil and gas has played a role in building that road through the oil and gas taxes are paid. And I'm talking about besides the motor fuels tax that is paid, oil and gas contributes so positively. You know, in thinking about the progress that's made in flaring, Chairman Longoria, Speaker Craddick mentioned the decline in flaring. That is due to companies taking a proactive stance. Even though we've had lower production we know to do, companies are doing things to reduce the overall level of flaring. And so we've had a lot about the environment. I think people may not fully know that industry spends billions of dollars in improving the environment. Methane emissions are lower, carbon dioxide emissions are lower, all because of clean natural gas. Do you sense that we're making the strides that we need to? And do you think all Texans understand that some of the criticisms that were leveled on oil and gas just may not be true? And give us your thoughts on that, if you would, please.
You know, I agree with you, Todd, and what Speaker Craddick just mentioned. I think the Railroad Commission has done a phenomenal job of addressing this. They're incentivizing using new technology and the limit of flaring. So I think that's, a step in the right direction. I kind of want to go back to the budget again. I think it's incredibly important for everybody to understand that aside the direct benefit that you see from the oil and gas industry, it's that indirect benefit. Those wages are very good, and the men and women that work in those industries, which translates to sales tax dollars. And that's incredibly important. That's where we're going to get our biggest hit. Folks aren't going out there, they're not shopping, they're not spending the money that they were before. And I think that's where we're going to have a big problem. So the industry provides great benefit, a direct benefit, but that indirect benefit of those good wages is something that we should be looking at. And the numbers I just mentioned a moment ago, all that's subject to change. I've seen baseline, optimistic, pessimistic, and we probably won't know where we're at till we're there, unfortunately, but it's something that we all need to be understanding of and aware of. So the oil and gas industry affects everything directly and indirectly in the state of Texas.
Well, we want to get back to the full strength that we have been at, and we're certainly looking forward to those opportunities. But, as Dave Hager just pointed out, innovation and technology is key to that. Speaker Craddick mentioned the commission actually needing to continue to improve the great strides they've made in technology. I think a lot of taxpayers, when they hear about funding agencies, they think, well, that's their taxpayer dollars funding different agencies. It's interesting to know that in Texas, oil and gas dollars actually fund the Railroad Commission and the fees that are paid and the other taxes. It's we pay a lot more in that are spent on the regulatory agencies, if you think about it. And so, And we need this industry. You know, some people think that oil and gas are opposed to regulations, and that's not the case. Oil and gas actually supports science-based regulatory approaches, and we need well-funded Railroad Commission and TCEQ to make that happen. So we appreciate y'all's sensitivity to these needs very much. Anything else on the environment that any of you wanted to comment on before we move on to another topic that I want to talk about? Anything else climate-wise or environmental progress-wise?
Go ahead, Chris.
Now, I just really quickly wanted to just kind of circle back a little bit. I think a lot of it comes down to education. And Todd, to your question to Oscar a moment ago about do you think people really understand what's going on, both on the benefit side of what they actually personally benefit from as a result of the oil and gas industry, and understand also that no one is doing more or investing more in improving the environment than the industry itself. And I don't think you get enough credit for that. And so that's something we got to work on from an education standpoint to make people better recognize and appreciate what's going on there, and realize what tremendous strides have happened in the last decade or 2 decades or so, that where we were 20 years ago and where we are today are like night and day. And so we have some work there to make people realize that there's a lot of good stuff going on, and no one is more invested in improving the environment, doing it safer, cleaner, more efficiently than the industry. So I just want to kind of point that out and kind of hammer that home.
Thank you for that message. Speaker Craddick, you had additional thoughts there as well?
Well, I think this, Todd. I think we've got to look at the long run, a different way, one, to fund schools in this state. I don't know what that is, but I think we've got to fund it. And I think we've also got to look at a way to fund the Railroad Commission and the oil and gas industry, regulatory industry. You know, and they're fee-based today, but that doesn't always work. And you can look at what's happened in this last year, 6-8 months, you know, and we're not drilling the wells. And back to your flaring, you're talking about people they are trying to control the thing, but people aren't drilling wells, they're not completing wells, and they're just sitting there. And companies are only going to be able to do that for so long before they're going to have to quit drilling. And then you'll see, like Chris and some of the others, and Representative Longoria talked about, where you're going to have people that they're going to get laid off, and we're going to lose a lot more jobs than we have. And we're going to see a lot of consolidation too.
Yeah. And Todd, on the commission, I do want to kind of reiterate what he was just saying there. We do, that is one of the most important things that we have to look at and make sure that through the budget process and as we evaluate overall what we're doing there, that we have a well-functioning, well-funded Railroad Commission, because exactly what the speaker just said is the case. Just because activity may be down or permits may be down doesn't mean that we don't have just as much or more need for enforcement and inspections and all of those things. I also agree wholeheartedly with the technical aspect. You know, we've done some good work in recent sessions to get some money into the commission to upgrade technology, even in the commission, and get them out of, you know, they were decades behind in a lot of cases, and we have more work to do there as well. And so we have to realize that the industry is evolving, because you're getting better and better at what you do as well. You know, you don't do the same way you used to. Now you have one pad and you've got, you know, laterals going all over the place. You don't have multiple pads. And so you've got all sorts of stuff that you have to evaluate here and make sure, most importantly, that we have a well-functioning, well-funded Railroad Commission that can do the work that they can do, that they can pay and retain good people to do that work. And so that is a critically important issue.
And I think also along that line, Chris, you talked about technology. I think a lot of the areas where we're drilling, where the state's drilling, they don't have broadband up in those areas. And I think we've got to strengthen that.
Right. I think that really is a good segue to infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, as I do that, what I've heard you gentlemen allude to, and what, you know, I asked Greg Gutfeld and Juan Williams what some advice, and they come at it from different political perspectives for sure, then they make it entertaining when they do. But, you know, their bottom line was, we're all in this together. We're one community, one America, one state, and we've got to find these solutions that work for everyone. You know, broadband is important. That's part of the critical infrastructure we live in today, is having access to modern technology. Broadband is just as important as our highway system, quite frankly, I think today. And we're all getting to meet today and communicate with, several hundred, if not 1,000 people throughout the course of this program today because of essential infrastructure. As we think about that, do you believe that Texas currently strikes a good balance between protecting landowners and allowing for the development of this essential infrastructure that we're talking about? And it is pipelines, but it's roads, it's electrical lines, it's broadband lines. And so, Chairman Longoria, why don't you start this, and then we want everyone to have a conversation about it as well. Is there a balance there? What do we need to do?
At this point, I think there is a balance. I think as things go forward, it's something we may have to look at as the technology is constantly changing and the way the environment, goes forward into the next decade. It's always subject to change. But at this point, I would feel that we're okay where we're at. Whenever you get into property owners' rights and, eminent domain, it's always a touchy subject, and we understand that. But at this point, I think we strike a good balance. And going forward, as things change, as industry changes, as the needs change for rural Texas or wherever it may be, it's things that we have to look at on a step-by-step basis. So to have a complete answer, it's very difficult. But I think where we're at right now, I think it's a good balance. And, we have the legislature, we have the Attorney General's office, we have every be able to discuss this going forward. But at this point, I would venture to say that we're at a good spot.
You want me to weigh in there, Todd?
Sure, yeah.
I think, again, I'm going to say education again. I think one of our challenges was we're trying to balance this landowners' rights and how we do business in the state too is we do have to recognize that the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of these issues get worked out without any problem. It's like anything else, in some cases, you might have a few bad actors or who maybe could have handled things a little bit differently that causes everyone else, all the good actors, to get dragged into a fight that maybe they didn't necessarily deserve to have to be in. And so, but I do think industry obviously has to be aware and that, if you're out in Speaker Craddick's area of the state or you're in my area of the state, you love seeing those trucks running up and down the road, and you don't mind if the ground shakes a little bit every once in a while. But if you live in Dallas, I think in terms of the Barnett Shell, when all that happened, and we had a lot of these issues coming up because all of a sudden you had people who were not used to that activity. They weren't like some of us who have been used to that all of our life. And so we have to recognize and be sensitive to the concerns as it relates to nuisance issues and things like that, safety issues, wherever it may be, and recognize that just some people are not as used to that stuff, and that we have to work with them. You see the aggregate industry right now having some similar challenges that the oil and gas industry could probably give them some pretty good advice on what some of those pitfalls are and maybe some solutions to how you get some of that resolved. And so I think that's part of it as well. There's a responsibility, certainly on the industry side, to make sure they're doing everything they can to be good neighbors and good corporate citizens in the way they handle some of that activity. But at the end of the day, the work has to be done. This activity has to happen. We just have to figure out how we can coexist and do it in the right way. But again, I think it's important for people to remember that it is rare that we have, it'll be on the front page of the newspaper or it'll be a headline somewhere, but that is the minority situation. That is not the case in the vast majority of these type of deals. And so it's important to remember that.
I think.
Let me make one comment, if I may.
Absolutely.
When you're looking at, we had the hearing that was in my committee this last session on, and then we've asked the AG's office to look at the landowner's Bill of Rights during the interim. I think you all have had some input into it too. And then, but you've got pipelines and you've got roads. A lot of the companies in our area are doing pipelines, moving product and water and everything like that, rather than the roads. And I think Chris mentioned this, it's a double deal. If you're in Dallas, people don't want to see big trucks on the highway, and in my area, you like to see them because that's progress being made. But I think all these have got to be put together where the landowners are happy. And, I had the idea of doing, where we do a bill, sit on, get it together, and then stick there for a while rather than keep trying to change it every year. And I think that's something we need to look at in this next session.
Well, we're certainly going to lean on you all three here and your colleagues. Y'all provide great leadership to our state. This industry could not play the role that it does in funding our schools and roads without, sound policies that give certainty. And treating landowners fairly is, very important to this industry. And we want to do our part, and we want to make certain we can continue to grow and add jobs and get this economy going. My folks are telling me we're out of time. I hate that because I've got about 10 more questions apiece, but we are out of time. If I could, though, maybe get 30 seconds from each of you and just some closing thoughts about, some advice for this industry. And Chris, let's start with you. And Mr. Speaker, we want to give you the final word as the Dean of the House.
Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
Chris, we'll start with you.
Yeah. Well, again, I want to thank you for having me today, and it's been a great discussion. I, again, want to thank the industry for all the good work they're doing and trying to address a lot of these issues and really leading the way in most of these. And so I look forward to the opportunity to continue to work with you on these issues and others, and just looking ahead to the future as well as things that we have to address. That people always say, what are going to be the big issues for this session? Well, Speaker Craddick could probably tell you that the big issues of this session were the big issues of the session that he came into the legislature. It's always going to be the same core issues at the end of the day that we're never going to ultimately fix. They're constantly evolving and things we have to address. So I look forward to trying to address those in all those areas, education, workforce development, infrastructure, both from transportation, pipeline, rural broadband, all of those issues are there. Healthcare, make sure from an access and affordability standpoint, and water, we're always going to be talking about water, both on, and as it relates to the industry, both on the supply and produce side as well. And people want to talk about this energy transition stuff, all the time. And that means something different to everyone. I think for some, they're thinking we're transferring away from oil and gas, but I don't view it that way at all. I think that it's, again, the industry every day is saying, how do we do it safer, cleaner, more efficiently? How do we do it better? And to me, that's what I think energy transition is. And so I just look forward to continue to be a partner with my colleagues and as well as the industry as we work towards solutions to a lot of these challenges.
We look forward to working with you, Chairman Longoria.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Todd, TXOGA, Speaker Craddick, Chris, glad to be here. I think it's important to show what the industry does for the entire state, the economic benefit, the direct and indirect, and to show members and the Senate as well on how the industry is working to be more efficient, modernize technology, and just have a cleaner operation. You see the progress. I think, unfortunately, many times the oil and gas industry gets an unfair hand. There's just this stigma that you're operating, 5, 10, 15, 20 years behind, but you're not. And there's significant amount of investment that's been made in this industry to make sure it's done in a clean, efficient way. And I think that needs to be the message, along with all the jobs that it offers going into this upcoming legislative session. We have to protect you, and we got to make sure that you guys continue to operate because you are the foundation of the Texas economy.
We appreciate that so very much, Representatives. Speaker Craddick, you get the final word today.
Oh, thank you. Well, thanks for having all of us, and thanks to the other two, to Representative Longoria and Representative Paddie, and Todd, thank you for this. Let me tell you, I can sum up. You asked what we need to think about. It's money, money, money. That's what's going to be happening. That's what everybody's going to pay attention to in the session. There's a joke in our office that when we've got money, we have nothing on the door. When a session like this, we just put a big no on the door and lock it, because that's what 90% of the people that come to see us, do you all not agree? That's what they want for something or not, for one thing or another. So I think money's the key. I think Representative Longoria was very great about the way he explained the dollars and where we're short and where we're going to have needs. But we are going to have to spend dollars in certain areas. Think about just the teacher area that we did for teachers last session, what we're going to have to fund this. And like I said, like we talked about, is additional infrastructure that we've got to have, and we've got to have additional technology. And so we're going to have to spend some, but I think it's going to be tough sledding.
Well, we know that Texas is going to be in good hands with you three gentlemen and your colleagues that, come together. This is one Texas. It's time to solve these challenges, and we're confident. And we thank you all for being with us today. It means a lot to all of our members. We hope you have a good and safe rest of your week.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You bet. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this just about concludes today's program. We are so thankful for our guests who delivered a dynamic program today. We had Greg Gutfeld, Juan Williams, Dave Hager, Speaker Tom Craddick, Chairman Oscar Longoria, and Chairman Chris Paddie. Most of all, though, we thank you, our viewers. You're the ones who make things happen. And we know that getting the right information out is what is needed for sound energy policy. That's why we invite you right now, take your phones before we sign off here today. Text this number, 52886. Take your smartphone, 52886 is the only number you need to type in. Put in the word TXOGA in the message, and this will allow you to subscribe to email updates providing the latest information about oil and natural gas, particularly in this upcoming session. You're going to need this information. We want to deliver it to you. Promise you, we will not spam you. You can unsubscribe at any time. To close, we have a short video that I think you will enjoy that highlights industry's dedication to innovation and progress for a cleaner, stronger, and better energy future. Thanks again for tuning in. We hope you have a great week.
Pipelines truly are the safest mode of transportation for oil and natural gas. We get a lot of product from point A to point B, and we're able to do it very safely.
He's been able to get this plastic so thin and so light. When I put it on, it just feels normal. And I can swing it perfectly fine from hip to knee, and it just works great.